Come get your victory at the table. Let's talk. Let's talk. Come get your victory at the table. Let's talk. Let's talk.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on whatever time you have decided to tune in with us. We would like to welcome you to another episode of Victory at the Table Talk, where we have down-to-earth conversations about various topics to assist with your walk with Christ. Here at the table, you can get the victory, but you can also get a taste of Victory Apostolic Church right here in Matson, Illinois, where we are building victorious Christ-like lives. Enjoy this episode.
Welcome to another episode of Victory at the Table Talk, the Gospel of Justice Ministry Edition. I am Reverend Bryant Warren. I am the CEO of the Gospel of Justice Ministry, and I will be your host today for this social justice podcast series. Today, we will be discussing the impact of the pandemic on our young Black students. So joining me today, I have two very special guests. First, I have Dr. Marcus Alexander. He is the superintendent of Pembroke School District in Kankakee County. Thank you, Dr. Alexander, for being here with us.
Thanks for having me, sir.
And we also have with us Gia Washington. She is the Director of Community Education at the Sertoma Center, and she is a licensed clinical professional counselor. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I want everyone to know that this particular podcast is a collaborative effort between the Gospel of Justice Ministry and the Joliet Alumni South Suburban Chapter charitable foundation of Delta Sigma Theta. So I'm very appreciative of this Sisters of Delta Sigma Theta for helping make this happen. So let's jump right in. So we have a pandemic going on. And I have a 16-year-old daughter. She's been at home since last March. And I know there's others who have much smaller kids who are at home. What is the impact of kids not being in school and being at home and learning? What is the impact on that for our kids?
To me, I think it's just life-changing because kids have never seen this before. Everything about them has been do this, do that, right now, and now it's just kind of like, let's go with the flow. Stay home all day and you get your schoolwork done when they tell you to, if you do it, And so I think right now it's just a tough time to be a kid. Nobody's prepared them for these skills. Nobody's prepared us as adults to deal with this type of a thing.
I got you. So what are some of the mental issues that could happen for our kids? What are you seeing as a professional in the field?
This has been a really difficult year for our young people. It's been a difficult year for their families. And so you're looking at a whole foundation that's been shaken. You're looking at the support that they would normally be able to receive from parents, and parents are basically just trying to keep it together. So what we're seeing is more trips to the emergency room. The 5 to 11-year-olds, just in general, there was an increase from 2019 to 2020. It was up 24%, and it was up 31% for the 12 to 18-year-olds. We're seeing children who are just absolutely overwhelmed as they're trying to adjust to e-learning.
So I want to go back. So an increase in emergency room visits, what are the causes of these visits?
So what we're seeing are more mental health emergencies.
Wow.
And so more where the parents are, I think what happens is when you had students that were in school, they had teachers or school face-to-face with teachers. The teacher could observe if maybe that child was struggling. They could start to see that, and they could get in, and there would be the earlier intervention. But now some of these situations are kind of falling through the cracks. So by the time it's noticeable, it has already escalated to the point where it's considered a mental health emergency. The stress of having to adjust, to this whole new school environment, not having the protective factors of the social support, not being able to see their friends, feeling like how am I supposed to log into one class and then change and go to another class? The concern about grades, the concern about the missed opportunities has been quite a bit. And all of this is done with the backdrop of all of the civil unrest we've seen in this past year. And we're also looking at it where our Black students are disproportionately affected by COVID. They are more likely to have lost family members. They're more likely to have experienced financial distress. And they're expected to sit and learn in this whole new environment with all of that going on.
Interesting. So, Dr. Alexander, in your district, what type of resources are you able to provide to some of our students? I'm imagining that you probably are a hybrid district, or kids are at home and some are in class. Can you
Correct.
give us a...
So we're, at this point, we're in a hybrid. I have about 65% of our students are back face-to-face in the building. We came back originally in January, probably with about 40 to 45%, and then we made up for it in March. So I think the bigger thing that we acknowledge is that sometimes school is the safe place for the kid. Sometimes schools are the place where the kid will know they'll get a meal. They'll know that they will get someone who shows care and concern for them. So by virtue of that, a lot of kids need school, right? So that's the first part. So what we've tried to do is really just to be relative to the fact that these kids are dealing with a lot, even before they come back into the building. And as an educator, it's very difficult for me to expect kids to perform at high academic levels without understanding what they've been through. And I'm not speaking just in past tense, what they're currently going through.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what are some of the signs that, as a parent, what are some of the signs that I should be concerned about? Because, you know, most of our kids, especially our teenagers, they stay in their room all day. I don't know if your teenagers are like mine. They stay in the room all day. They come out and eat and use the bathroom. But what are some of the signs that I should be looking at that possibly my kid is suffering some type of a mental distress or a mental emergency?
So what you're looking at is a change from the baseline. A teenager staying in their room could potentially just be a typical adolescent development. But is this someone who used to be a lot more social and now you're noticing that they're starting to withdraw? Are you noticing that they're sleeping more, that they seem more irritable? Do they seem more emotional where they're crying? Are you noticing increased anxiety where they're constantly asking questions or they need more reassurance than they normally needed? Are they not interacting with their friends? Have they lost interest in some of the activities that they used to enjoy? Have you seen a decline in school performance? And I know as a parent, it's really easy to focus on the grades going down as if that's the problem, but that might actually be a symptom where they've lost that motivation, where they just don't have the energy to care, where they're just trying to make it from day to day. And so instead of just, looking at it like, oh my goodness, you need to bring it up, the questions to ask are why? Just checking in, how are you doing? And not where we're expecting the answer to be just that generic fine, but no, really, how are you feeling? There's a lot going on. Let's talk about it. Just to let them tell you, there are some observable signs, but we don't necessarily see their thoughts. So we need to give them an opportunity to express those thoughts to us. Are you feeling helpless? Are you feeling hopeless? Are you feeling overwhelmed?
Gotcha. So between the two of you, what are some ways that I can support my students? And, I have a 16-year-old, but, others who have 5, 6-year-olds who are, or even if you're in first, second grade, what are some things that each of you can share with me that will help me support my student?
I think the first part is just being aware and being relative to the situation. These kids didn't ask to be here. These kids did not ask to be in this world of chaos where you can't get too close. Me as an elementary administrator, one of my highlights is seeing little kids who want to hug on you and pull on you. Sure. And now, you kind of give them the stiff arm, all right, 6 feet, that's hard for them.
Right.
So really just being relative to understand that a lot of kids are dealing with things that they necessarily don't understand. They're dealing with things that they necessarily have not seen or been exposed to. Even in my own home, I have small children, a kindergarten and a preschooler. And I find myself having just to walk away for a while because when they were home all day long and e-learning is killing them, you know,
Sure.
I can't remember my password for this module and the teacher jumped to that class, and, you know, so they're frustrated and I'm getting frustrated because they're not moving fast enough. And even though I have a schedule to keep, they're just like, I'm on this extended vacation.
Right.
But really just being relative to know that they need extra love and nurturing right about now.
Got it. Okay. Anything you want to add to that?
I want to piggyback on the awareness, and it is the awareness of how they're struggling, but also the awareness of how you as a parent might be struggling, because a lot of time our stress is going to be passed on to our children.
Sure.
Even when we think that they're unaware, they can feel it, they can sense it, and they don't necessarily feel safe if they feel like that foundation for them or that rock isn't as steady as they had hoped it would be. But I also think that validating their feelings, instead of saying things like, well, you should just be glad that, or at least this, it's, what you're dealing with, like you were saying, what you're dealing with is tough.
Sure.
And I'm sorry that you have to deal with this, and asking, like, how can I support you in this moment? Sometimes, like, if you see them struggling with an assignment, instead of the getting frustrated because it isn't done and you have like 100 things to do, and we all have a lot on our plates right now, it is, can we take a moment right now? Can we just breathe together? Reminding them that they are more important than anything else that's going on, so that they feel that sense of security and that they feel loved. And when they're hard on themselves, they know that their parent isn't going to be hard on them. It's not like you don't have expectations, but that everything is done with that love and with the patience.
That's a great answer. So should I be concerned that it's been a year that my daughter and our students have been able to socialize other than through their phones or a parade past the home for a birthday and we're waving, and you talked about that physical contact? Is that something we should be worried about, or is it not a big deal that they're not having that social contact?
I think it's a huge deal. I think it's a huge deal, especially from an academic perspective. It's not just about reading and math. It's about socialization. It's about learning how to live with other people and how to cohabitate with other people. So you have to have that social interaction. And just like Gia talked about, you don't want the kid to withdraw from life.
Gotcha.
So as parents and as adults and leaders, we have to create those opportunities. I understand that we're in a world where certain restaurants or certain businesses are closed or there's capacity limits, but you have to fight that fight. You have to fight that fight, because the reality is that at some point, this too shall pass. And we have to make sure that we're preparing our children and our students to navigate the waters as we move forward.
Got it.
We can't just live here in the pandemic. What are we going to do after it's over?
Awesome. Did you want to add to that about the social issues or anything like that?
I agree with what you're saying. I think we also have to recognize that it may be a bit awkward for them as they're adjusting from only communicating virtually to communicating face to face. You know, when you're unable to like run around with someone, you forget almost how to do that. And so providing those opportunities, and also realizing that some of it they may need a little bit of coaching, you know, like,
Gotcha.
okay, you can do this now. Some of the skills that are being lost are, how do you read body language, the nonverbal communication, because it is so different to see a face on the screen than it is to sit next to someone, to have to figure out, how do we share, you know, how do we take turns? You know, that gets lost when you are in
Whoever
a
can share
virtual
screen, that's who gets their turn, right? Now, if I'm the host, then I'm in control, right?
It's so different when you're in a virtual environment.
It is. So not only for our black kids have to deal with the pandemic, this is where it's also different. First of all, their families have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. More of their families have probably been sick or probably know someone who has died because of the pandemic. There's a lot of fear in our community because of that. But then on top of that, we have the issue of law enforcement abuse in the black community. And so our students are at home. They've got their pads and their phones, and they're seeing George Floyd being murdered. They're seeing Micaiah, who was just shot in Columbus, Ohio, Adam Toledo, Dante Wright. Is that an impact that has happened on our kids? Do you see that having any type of impact on our students?
I'm in my mid-30s, and it impacts me daily. So I can only imagine what kids are feeling. And more than anything, I can only imagine what they're seeking. They're seeing that, well, they teach us at school to love everybody and to be relative and, nice to everybody. But I see on TV that white police officers are killing black people left and right, boys and girls, all ages. So how am I supposed to respond to that? Is this hypocrisy that you're telling me to do one thing, but I'm really seeing another? So I think the reality becomes, as adults, parents, leaders, we have to have those real conversations with students. I know that was part of the conversation after the verdict of George Floyd in my school. How do you feel about that? And one of the, it took my mind back when they deliberated for Laquan McDonald, and everybody was just so in an uproar because of the verdict. We're going to just give you a little slap on the wrist.
Sure.
But then we came to George Floyd and we got the verdict that we felt we needed. But then in the back of your mind, you say, wait a minute, this process is not done yet.
Correct.
So we thanking God and shouting hallelujah because all guilty on all three. But then what happens when a verdict come down for sentencing that says, we'll give them 2 years.
Right. 3 years.
3 years. And it's hard to communicate that and to teach a kid what that means. So a lot of it is, one, me as an adult, having control and understanding of my feelings and emotions so that I can be a leader and a guide to children because they're dealing with it as well. And if we don't get in front of it, grab that, by the hand and deal with it, then we've lost the battle and we've lost our kids.
Gotcha. What do you see? How was these images on television? Because kids have access. Back in the day, if I wanted to sneak something, I had to wait late at night and turn on the TV. These kids have access to these body cams anytime they want, and they can see Dante Wright being murdered, George Floyd being murdered, the young lady in Columbus being murdered, Adam Toledo being murdered. What is the mental impact of watching these type of images?
I'm concerned about a secondary trauma. When you're seeing this and you're exposed to it, and that has now become your diet, okay, I've watched this person die. Now I'm desensitized because, I should be outraged that there's a death, but it's happening so frequently that it's just like that's par for the course right now. And I'm worried about that because I remember even talking to a group of high schoolers prior to, this past year. And I asked them, I said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And they could not answer that question.
What grade was this?
They were high schoolers.
Wow.
They could not imagine what 5 years down the line could look like.
Wow.
And I worry about our children who are younger and they're growing up and this is what they're seeing. I'm worried that they're going to lose hope.
Wow.
It's why even try if I don't know if I'm going to be around. I hear parents say that when the police come, their children go in the house until they leave. And we know that it isn't all police officers at all, but they're so afraid because they're not being shown the officers are trying to help the community. They're being shown the ones that are killing people.
Gotcha.
When you have to have a saying, Black Lives Matter, because that's not something that you can take for granted, and that's not what you see other people acting like, that's a shame. And then you have people pushing back. Why do you have to say Black Lives Matter? We need our young people to know that they do matter, that they are important, and that they do have futures.
Gotcha.
We need them not to give up and lose hope.
So what are some resources that I could go to my school district and should be able to ask for? What partnerships can I build with my district and should ask for resources for my student? Or help me out here, Doc.
Sure. I think most school districts, especially in our Chicagoland, South suburban area, I think most school districts have understood from day one that this is a mental health crisis. Outside from this being a worldwide pandemic, this is a mental health crisis. We have people who have lost jobs because companies folded. We have people who've lost their homes because they've lost jobs. We have people who go days without eating and children who go days without eating. We have children who have seen grandma and auntie and, family members die, not just one, but multiple. We've seen children who will come to school and say, yeah, my grandma's on a ventilator. It's not looking too good. So most school districts have identified that social emotional learning is our top priority. So schools all across the state of Illinois and really across the country are looking at what systems and structures do we put in place. I know in my district, we're looking at how do we create a family student engagement center where kids and their families can go speak to mental health counselors, to psychologists, social workers, and that's outside of what we do in the regular school. Our school psychologists and school social workers, they have a particular purpose and a particular skill set. Sure. But sometimes dealing with the issues that we are dealing with now, you need something on a higher level. You need people who are more intently trained in trauma. And so I think that's one of the biggest elements, providing that opportunity. And even giving parents the ability to say, hey, I just need to talk to somebody.
Sure.
And as a parent of children who just active, they're brilliant kids, they're just active. Sometimes I need to talk to somebody before I, put my hands on them.
Exactly.
But I think even as a professional person, we get weak mentally. And we need to figure out how to deal with what we're feeling. And if that happens to a professional, what do you think happens to a child?
Absolutely. So before we close out, Gia, I want you to give us what's the hope here. So we're in a pandemic. We're dealing with the issues of Black Lives Matter and law enforcement. We've come through a big political hoorah as well. What is the message of hope that we can leave with our audience today?
I would say that the message of hope is knowing that there are people out there who are willing to help. And so recreating the sense of community that we used to have back in the day, I think we're going to appreciate those interactions a little bit more now because we haven't been able to have them. And so that whole it takes a village, it's strengthening our village. It's making sure that instead of us, looking at our young people and saying, oh my goodness, he's bad, not using those kinds of terms, because there are times that we're looking at behaviors that are a result of trauma. So shifting what we see, looking at our young people, and when they don't believe in themselves, we have to believe in them. We have to feed that positivity into them. We have to love on them. We have to expose them to different types of programs. But we simply cannot give up on them. We can't look at it like it's a hopeless situation. We have to know that if we all band together, if we use all of our resources, all of the professionals, all of the lay people, that we really can make a difference.
I like that. We can make a difference together as a community. We can make a difference, and not to isolate ourselves in our corners and not wanting to ask for help. And a lot of us, we can become very prideful. We don't want to reach out and ask for the help that we need. Please reach out and get the help that you need because it is available to you. Well, I want to thank each of my guests for being here, Dr. Alexander, Gia Washington for being here. And again, this was put together by JSIG, the charitable foundation of the Joliet chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. Did I say that correct? All right. And the Gospel Justice Ministry. And you'll see more of these type of collaborative efforts coming soon. And so this concludes this episode of Victory at the Table Talk, the Gospel of Justice Ministry edition. And we will see you soon. I pray that you'll have a victorious day. And again, it takes all of us, and you are not alone.
Come get your victory.